and good evening, and welcome to the British Library, and welcome also to our online audience. It's lovely of you to join us. This is the first edition of Deadly, the Festival of Women Writing Crime. Yay! Thank you, we're really excited, not least because we're launching the festival with the next bestseller from Tess Gerritsen, whose writing has been described as the Thursday Murder Club on steroids. So I hope you're strapped in safely to your seats tonight. Tess has come all the way from the US to share her brand new book, The Summer Guests, and we can't wait to join the Martini Club to find out more. And I hope you noticed that our bar has actually put on the martini in honour of Tess's work. And Tess Gerritsen will be in conversation with the brilliant Sam Blake. Sam has had a string of #1 bestsellers, including Keep Your Eyes on Me and Remember My Name. She's been shortlisted for Irish Crime Novel of the Year 3 times. Her latest book, The Killing Sense, which is amazing. It just got me by the throat. It was an instant bestseller, and if you're here tomorrow, you'll be lucky enough to hear her talk all about it and get yourselves a copy. Sam is pretty much a big deal in the world of crime, and she's been an unwavering supporter of this festival, so I'm so grateful for your help in the planning of this festival. Thank you, Sam. Back to tonight. If you're online, pop your questions in the box, and if you're here in the room, stick your hands up when it comes to Q&A. Apart from that, just have a brilliant time, and please join me in giving a huge welcome to Sam and Tess.
Sit back and relax now and have a little bit of a chat. Thank you so much for coming tonight. The British Library, as you can see, is an amazing place. Bea has done an absolutely amazing job programming this incredible festival. And I am deeply honoured to be here and privileged, honestly, to talk to Tess Gerritsen, who I'm going to introduce now, who has a very long bio, so bear with me a second. A graduate of Stanford University with a BA in anthropology. Tess went to medical school at the University of California, San Francisco, where she was awarded her MD and became a doctor. While on maternity leave, guys, she began to write fiction, and with 2 unpublished novels in the drawer, in 1987, her first novel, Call After Midnight, was published. It was the first of 31 suspense novels, and she's written over 36 in her career, 36-year career. Incredible. She also wrote the screenplay for Adrift, which aired as a 1993 CBS Movie of the Week starring Kate Jackson. If there's anything wrong here, you have to interrupt me and tell me. Tess's first medical thriller, Harvest, was released in hardcover in 1996, and it marked her debut in the New York Times bestseller list. Her novels have been hit bestsellers ever since. Her books have been translated into 40 languages, and more than 40 million copies have been sold around the world. Tess has won both the Nero Wolfe Award for Vanish and the Rita Award for The Surgeon, and critics around the world have praised her, including authors like Stephen King, which is that's the one we all want, isn't it? Absolutely. But also Time Magazine, who named her novel The Surgeon one of the best mystery thriller novels ever written. Her series of novels features homicide detective Jane Risley and medical examiner Maura Isles, which has inspired the TV series, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, and I'm very excited to hear that The Spy Coast was optioned by Amazon. Tess is married to a physician and has 2 sons, and when she's not writing, she enjoys gardening. And I've written here, playing the fiddle. Is it the fiddle or the violin?
It depends on what kind of music you play.
Excellent.
The same instrument.
But, oh, is it? Oh, right. So this is my ignorance coming out here, because when I was listening to Tess speak in Harrogate a few years ago, we were just talking about it outside, and I was mesmerised by her, and she was talking about playing the violin, and there was a big piece of music we were talking about that yes. It was just really interesting. And I had fiddle in my head that this one was a fiddle player, so that's where I got that from. So, there we go. I can't really see outside because there's a lot of you. How many people have read Tess Gerritsen before? Show of hands. Excellent. How many people have read The Spy Coast? Okay, a few more still to go. How many people have read The Summer Guests? Excellent, that's great. Right, I asked, excuse me as I knocked the table, because I read these and I was absolutely mesmerised. I read this one first because I knew we were talking about The Summer Guest, and was completely absorbed by the Martini Club, which I'm going to talk about now. And you need to make sure you buy it tonight, and she'll sign it, obviously. There are books outside. And then I finished reading this, and I thought I felt quite bereft because I wasn't with these people anymore. And then I realised I had this one too, and realised this was actually the first, so I read them completely backwards, as you do. I'm not supposed to admit things like that on stage. But Tess Gerritsen. tell me a little bit about the inspiration for the summer guests, because I think that's a fascinating story.
It's based on the little village where I live. I live in this town of 5,000 people in the state of Maine, which is way up north near Canada. So when we first moved there 35 years ago, my husband, the doctor, wanted to open up a new medical practice. And he would, bring in new patients, and he would always ask them their occupational history. And because we are a fairly old state, a lot of retirees, these people that would come in would be, gray-haired retirees. And he heard this answer pretty often. I used to work for the government, but I can't tell you what I did. And after he heard that a couple of times, he just wondered, where did we move to? And it was a real estate agent who told us that they were retired from the CIA, that we were surrounded by, ex-spies. Wow. And I found out that on my little street we had 6 houses in my little street, we had 2 spies, 2 retired spies.
That's quite a high percentage, really, in the grand scheme of things, isn't it?
It is a very high percentage rate. And then my son, his good friend, they were going to have a sleepover, so I was on the phone talking to the father to make sure everything was arranged. And he said something that made me laugh, and I said, "Oh, you must be one of those spies." There's a long silence on the phone. And he said, "Who have you been talking to?" Ooh. So, and I found out that they were married spies. So, I've known about this for 35 years, but it never occurred to me to write a book about them until I got older. And I began to look at my neighbors in a different way. People, you see these gray-haired ladies pushing their little carts to the supermarket, and before you would think, "Oh, that's a sweet granny." And now I would look at them and think, did you used to carry a gun?
Exactly.
Did you used to be dangerous? And I wanted to write about older people who have previous lives, and what were those lives like? Because we don't look at older people and really think of them as they were when they were vital young people doing dangerous things. So it was sort of fun to imagine what their lives could have been like.
That's so true. And just, yes. One of the wonderful things about this group of people is that there's a selection of them. So the Martini Club, I'm talking about the Martini Club, there are 5 of them, aren't there? I have to write their names down so I didn't forget, because I'm terrible. I'm just saying to Tess outside, I can't even remember my own characters' names, never mind other people's. So here we go. Maggie, who I adored. Declan, a little bit of Irishness going on there, excellent. Ben and Ingrid and Lloyd are the team, and they've met up. They live in this little enclave around the lake in Purity, Maine. And they're wonderful because they're all very different. And it's their sort of coming together. Tell us a little bit about how, in the story, how they all ended up in the same place, exactly, and how they met, yes.
Yes, well, in the Spy Coast, you find out that they met in training. They met at the farm, which is the CIA place for getting their undercover agents prepared for the field. So 4 of them met there, and they bonded there, because it's really rough training. It's not just going through, running through fields and jumping over things and climbing ropes. They actually have like a mini city built in the farm, where they learn to follow people. They learn how to avoid telling too much under torture. So it is a rough training, and they bonded. But then they got sent off to other parts of the world. Now, one of them, Ingrid, marries outside their initial group, but she marries a CIA analyst. And then later on, they come to retirement, and they all decided to come to this little town because one of them had moved there. He liked it. He told the others, and they came as well, which is, I think, organically, how a lot of CIA retired in Maine, is that a few of them came. I know we have one B&B that was run by a CIA retiree, and he would invite his friends to come and stay for the summer, and they liked it, and they began to come, and so it becomes like this magnet. One person has to be the initial magnet, and that's what happens in the book as well.
Yeah, you can really understand that. I think it's a way of life which is so different from anybody else's, that you can really only relate to people who've, you can relate to other people as well, but the people who know, who are in the know.
Yes.
You have that shared understanding, and I think it's very clearly a bond for this group.
Yeah, and you can talk.
Yes, and you can talk freely, and you're talking the same language, I suppose, which is... They're a wonderful group, and Maggie drives the summer guest. She's the sort of main character in this one. And She's just great. She's a good character. Were there particular of them that you favoured when you were
It started off with
developing them?
Well, I mean, like a lot of writers, it starts off with this little kernel. I mean, beyond the fact that I'm surrounded by retired spies. The other thing that came to me was Maggie's voice. And I find that this is the most powerful way to start a book, is to be able to hear a character talking to you. And it's a little weird because, you know, they don't exist. But I could hear her say, I think I was lying in bed, about to go to sleep, and this woman says to me in my head, "I'm not the woman I used to be." Yeah.
Yeah. That's the line I've written down here.
Yes, yeah, and the first thing the writer thinks is, who did you used to be? Yeah. And you let her tell the story.
Yeah, oh, it's amazing. I just find that the way writers access story, how story arrives, it's a bit weird, really. And I think, you know, it's a bit like the retired CA agents. It's only another writer that really understands that, or a really avid reader who you know, can really get that whole process. And I love the idea that she came to you in a dream and spoke to you. She's a very, very strong character. I was desperate, this is, when you've read this, you'll understand, well, I was desperate for her to give Callie one of her hens so Callie could have blue eggs. And then it happened in a big way. We won't talk too much about that, but she really is, in terms of building a character and creating somebody who is completely three-dimensional, who's completely real, who feels like you feel like you know them by the end.
Yeah, and you know what? There's so much you can hear about. You can find out about a character by listening to their voice. You hear their gender. You hear how old they are, because the older people have gravelly voices. You can hear their educational level by their vocabulary. But most important for me, when I can hear a character, I'm listening for the emotion. And when I heard Maggie's voice, it was regret. She was regretful for something that had happened. I mean, she left the CIA because of something that had happened, and of choices she made. And she regrets those choices, and that's the core of The Spy Coast, is what was that choice she made.
Yeah, and it's a big one, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a big one.
It was a really big one. Yeah, you have to read it too. And just, because, well, I need to get some guests, obviously, but because that's what we're supposed to be talking about, but The Spy Coast, obviously, is the first, and that takes us to Bangkok, and it takes us all around the world. There's a scene where Maggie meets somebody in Bangkok, and they're at one of these sort of outside restaurant-y things, and I've never been to Bangkok, but I could see it so clearly, and it's raining, and you can hear the rain bouncing off the concrete and stuff, and it was just amazing. Have you spent a lot of time in Bangkok? Or?
Every place that I wrote about in The Spy Coast, I've been to. Yeah. So Bangkok, I mean, and you'll notice if you get hungry reading this book,
I could nearly smell the food.
There's a lot of food in here because my father was a professional cook.
Aha.
And when I traveled, partly it's just to eat. So
that's as good a reason as any.
Yeah. So there's a lot about food in Bangkok and in Istanbul.
Yeah, it is, and it's just amazing. That particular scene is an important one, and I can still see it. I feel like I'm still sitting there. I felt quite bereft when I finished reading these books, so I have to say. So I hope there is another one coming, isn't there?
Yes, but the fun thing about spies is that if they've lived abroad, they have they have palates that are wide open, that they are ready to eat anything. And so when my spies get together and have a potluck dinner.
They do, then
you know it's going to be an interesting potluck dinner.
Yeah, no, it's great. So they get together, the spies are living around the lake, and they set up a book club. They call it a book club, which they call the Martini Club, which is why we have our martinis outside, our cocktails outside now for you to avail of later. And it sort of feels like a cover. Well, it is a cover, isn't it, for them all to be able to get together. But it's amazing. What I loved about them is that they're both books. They're books of contrasts. So they're books of one is set in the summer, one is set in the winter. There's conflict. Was that a conscious effort when you started The Spy Coast? Did you know you were going to summer guests?
No, I didn't. The Spy Coast was going to be a one-off about Maggie, the retired spy. But when probably this happens to you too, when I finished that book, I did not want to let the characters go.
Yeah, her story wasn't over.
I wanted to go back and have cocktails with them again and hear their spy gossip and find out what the other people's lives were like. But when I did the summer guests, I was focusing on the community they lived in, because it's my town. Yeah. And there's something about living in a vacation town like I am in. When the outsiders show up every summer, You know, like if you have a beach town in Cornwall, for instance, and they show up, they're down from London, and they're a pain sometimes.
Yeah.
So that's the conflict that I was seeing as the locals versus the people from away. But it's also the conflict that is constant throughout the story of young versus old.
Yeah.
You know, the young people don't really appreciate that the little gray-haired lady was a very dangerous woman as a young woman. And they don't value the institutional wisdom that they may be able to impart. So there's that conflict between between the different generations as well.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, there's inherent conflict in the whole story because as well as that, there's the rich and the poor. That's what we get in the summer guests particularly, because you've got these big summer houses. They're huge, beautiful mansions. And then the locals who are living in sort of much smaller, particularly one particular guy who's living in a very small sort of shack across the lake. And that must be very difficult, I think, for people, for the locals living in an area when the money comes in. And yet they probably need it in the area to keep the economy going. And so there's always that juxtaposition, isn't that?
It is. Well, there's a push and pull because we do need them. We need the tourists, and yet when they come, it's a little bit like Barcelona, like, okay, we're tired, now go away. Then we get our squirt guns out.
No, it really is interesting. And I think it's interesting that you didn't know, well, you only knew when you got to the end of the Spy Coast that there would be another book. Because all the groundwork is there. I feel sometimes, a character's story isn't over, and you need to keep moving with them. And it's wonderful with these because you've got 5 of them, so we can find out.
I do, and what I've learned from Brazilian Dial series is that once everybody's happy, the series ends. So lives always have to be in flex. There always has to be evolution in characters as well. So when you see Maggie at the first book, The Spy Coast, it's a tragic end. I mean, there's a lot of tragedy involved, but you see the beginnings of hope, and then it shows up more in the summer guests. Yeah.
Well, as I said, I read them backwards, and so you can read them out of order, as I discovered. Summer guests, so take us back to, we've established the fact that there's some CIA agents in the obviously you knew that, you built them up in the Spy Coast. Take us back to the idea that sparked the summer guests, because it's about the disappearance of a teenage girl, isn't it?
Yes, well, what really sparked it was I was having dinner with the adult child of a CIA retiree who died. There were a couple months where every dinner I went to, there was somebody there who worked for the CIA. So she said that the family had moved to town because her father worked for MK Ultra. And I thought, what's that? And then I went down the rabbit hole. You know, you go on and you look at Wikipedia, what is MK Ultra, and then it gets weirder and weirder and weirder. So the story of MK Ultra was it was started in 1953 during the Cold War, when we were concerned that the Russians were ahead of us, the North Koreans were ahead of us in certain types of research. And the research involved mind control. You know, how do you get somebody to spill their secrets? How do you interrogate? And we believed that they were using drugs, various kinds of drugs, or electric shock therapy. And so the CIA said, well, let's get into the act. So they opened up their own drug testing places around the country under weird names. It was like MK Ultra was the umbrella, and there were 150 sub-projects that they were funding. And I mean, now that we think about it, it was ridiculous. In San Francisco, they actually had a bordello. The CIA was running a whorehouse. And the prostitutes were in on it, and they would be giving their Johns drugs. And then behind one-way glass, there were CIA agents taking notes about the effects of the drugs. And even the name of that particular sub-project was really funny. It was Project Midnight Climax.
Oh, no.
So, and of course the Johns, they were given the drugs and they found out later, but of course they were never going to tell anybody because they didn't want anybody to know. So I found out that we had a branch of it in my little town in Maine.
Wow.
I believe that it was mostly hypnotic, they were testing hypnosis and magic mushrooms. But the upshot of it was that there were some tragedies. People died. People who did not know they were getting the drugs. Mainly, there was one CIA person who was given them the drugs and had a psychotic break and jumped out of an 11-story window and died. Okay. So I went to congressional hearings, and the upshot of it was that the director of the CIA destroyed all the records. leaving only like 6 boxes of documents. Now, as a writer, as a novelist, that's great.
Does. It leaves you lots of room, doesn't it?
Because you can write whatever you want and they don't have anything to say that's
wrong.
not possible.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things I wanted to bring into it was why is the CIA in this little town in Purity, and what ramifications were there, what happened in the 1970s. So that was one of the things. But the other story was, we're surrounded by lakes. We have lots of ponds and lots of, beautiful, beautiful, quiet ponds. And the story is about a teenager who goes missing. And they think she might have drowned, so they search the pond, and instead of finding the girl, they find the bones of a long dead woman who's been dead for at least 50 years. And who is she? Clearly she was murdered, so now we have 2 mysteries. And my way of bringing the whole crew back into it, of course, the cop has to do it because that's her job. Why does the Martini Club get involved? The prime suspect for the girl's disappearance is Maggie's next door neighbor, another farmer.
Yeah.
And he comes to her for help. So they have every reason to be involved. Because, one of the problems with being a crime writer is that why would your character get involved unless they are professional?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I love learning something new in a book when I read it. It's just one of the things I love. I love a good mystery. I love the twists and the turns, and there are lots of twists and turns, and twists and turns that are so smooth and slick and clever that you just go right the way through, and you learn it as the characters are just really, really brilliantly executed. But it's learning that little bit, that the MK Ultra, and not knowing about that, and I really love that, and that level of research. It just, because it feels so natural to them because it's part of their world and it's all part of that. Did you have to do lots of did any of the people your neighbours who are in the CIA, who pretending they aren't in the CIA, were they able to talk to you about
No, they do not talk. They do not talk.
Listening devices or,
Their children will sometimes talk. But it's a small town. We gossip a lot.
Yeah.
We know who the agents were.
Yeah.
And it's like the worst kept secret in Maine. For instance, our library director was CIA.
Oh, goodness.
And her husband was CIA. And when a journalist...
It's like everybody.
Yes. When the journalist came to town, actually looking up this story, he thought it was a great story, she said, I'll talk to you. And then he got there and she goes, no, I won't talk to you. So then he talked to her daughter. And the daughter says, to be honest, Mom and Dad never told us anything. Yeah. So they do keep their secrets to the grave.
Great. Well, I mean, that's the job, isn't it?
That's the job. Except for one person who apparently would not stop talking about it because he got Alzheimer's.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. That's a problem for the CIA.
Yes.
Like that's a whole book on itself. What happens to that guy? Yeah, but yeah, it's fascinating. The level of detail, it feels so real. It feels that everything is there. These guys, these 5 people know their jobs inside out and backwards. You've got, as I said, mentioned the analyst there. You've got, is it Declan, who was a professor, and they'd worked in different places.
all the
cover stories in different parts of the world. And they feel completely real. And it's just...
Well, it's funny because there's not really much spycraft in these stories. When I set out to write this, it was very much, I wanted to know Maggie the woman. Yeah. And I wanted to know spies as human beings. And I wasn't interested in gunplay. I wasn't interested in shoot-em-ups or James Bond. Yeah. I wanted to know, what is it like to live a life where you cannot tell the truth to your own spouse? Wow. And that is one of the things that leads to the tragedy in the Spy Coast. Yeah. I just can't imagine what stress that is. And I know that they have a high divorce rate. Yeah. They have a lot of alcoholism. It has to do with just the psychological toll of being in that kind of a profession.
Stress and remembering everything, because as I say, I can't remember the names of my characters, your character, anybody's characters. trying to remember the stories and what you've told people and haven't told them.
Yeah, keeping the lies going.
That must be just a whole different world. I suppose it's like being an actor but being permanently on stage. Yes. And never having a break. So. And
then even when you walk off the stage and go home, you still got to keep some semblance of something going.
A different version of it or whatever. And Maggie's neighbour, who is the gentleman who gets himself in a pickle because he becomes prime suspect for this killing. It's his granddaughter, who's called Callie, who keeps hens. So you can look out for the hens and the blue eggs as the story progresses. And I think it's that detail that I love about it. It's not just these main characters who are amazing. It's actually all the side characters as well. They feel very, very real. And that farm is the detail of the hens and the types of hens. And she's selling the eggs and she collects the eggs and his background. And you can see it. Do you live on a farm, or do you?
My son had 100 chickens at one point.
Somebody had to have chickens. That's really interesting chicken detail.
I had to babysit them for a couple of weeks when he went on holiday. So I know what it's like to raise chickens.
It sounds silly, but it's that type of detail, I think, in a book that makes the book real. It makes the story sing.
But I think that when we write, we automatically pull things from our own lives. So I wouldn't pull a detail of something that I'm completely unfamiliar with, because I think, why would I do that when I know chickens?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought somebody must know chickens, because it was, that sounds silly, I know, but you'll get to the chickens. And I was very interested in, because your first lines are quite important to you, aren't they? And also I think you have a word for each book. You associate a word with each book as you're writing it. But I was really interested in the first line, and we start in the Summer Guest. We go back to 1970, make sure I haven't mixed other books here. And the first line is, on the last day of his life, Randy Pelleter ordered a blueberry muffin and a coffee in the Marigold Cafe. And I love that for a last line, on the last day of his life. So immediately the tension is building. Do you spend a lot of time working on first lines, or do they just come?
That first line is the most important line. That and the last line are the most important lines of the book. And I find that I will often write that as the last thing I ever do.
Ooh.
So with the Summer Guests, I don't even think I wrote that first chapter until the very end. So you're going forward. You have all this motion. You have this plot moving forward, and the characters developing. You get to the end. You think it's missing something, and then I will think it needs some backstory.
Yeah.
And that's where that prologue came from.
Yeah. Where that story it gets us straight, and immediately we know there's going to be a problem.
And the thing about first lines that always work is that there's some kind of a contradiction.
Yes.
Something that doesn't make sense. So you have this very sweet, he's ordering a blueberry muffin and coffee at the cafe, but you also juxtapose that with on the last day of his life. So you know something is going to happen.
Yeah.
But you don't know what direction that's going to come from.
Yeah. That's genius. The first line is that juxtaposition. Whenever I do an interview with an author, there's always a nugget of gold for writers, and that's the nugget of gold.
Yeah.
That juxtaposition of things happening in that first line.
Just to know that something's not right. And it doesn't have to be like a giant, like this was kind of a giant juxtaposition.
Well, it was. Yeah.
But I read a book, and I can't remember, where the first line was just, he could not decide.
Yeah.
You know, that's good. It leaves you off balance. You don't know what the topic is, but a character is somehow in flux.
Yeah, absolutely. My favourite novel is Rebecca.
Yes.
By Daphne du Maurier. And last night I dreamed of Mandela. Immediately we're like, well, why last night? What happened?
Right.
All of the things, all of the questions. Definitely, yes. There's a huge sense of the friendship between the characters in this book, and I was really interested in how much your sort of anthropological studies fed into that. Yeah,
well, I tend to be kind of a lonely person in terms of I just like shut myself in my...
You've just got characters talking to you.
Yes, I just like characters talking to me. I want real people talking to me. But I find of all the things I could have studied in college, I feel that anthropology turned out to be the most useful as a writer. I was studying cultural anthropology, so it teaches you to look at humanity as tribes, various tribes. And, you know, there are the tribes of women who are raising their kids and you know, hanging out in the nursery school, and there's the tribes of bankers, and so we all have our own little tribes with our own little cultural beliefs. And that really helped me when I did a book called Gravity, which was about the International Space Station. And one way I was able to get into NASA and talk to people was that I was able to identify two separate tribes. There's a tribe of people who work for NASA, civilian space people, and then there's a tribe of military space people, and they do not intersect very well.
Interesting,
so when I was I called up NASA and I said, I'm interested in doing a thriller that's set in space, and there's a lot of disasters that happen. And he said, well, we at NASA, we want to make our organization look good. And I said, well, don't worry about it, because everything that goes wrong is not your fault. And he said, whose fault is it? And I said, it's the military's.
Oh.
And he said, when would you like to come? So it's one of those things where I knew that they didn't like each other.
Yeah.
So you can sometimes use that. But here I am writing The Summer Guest, and I'm talking about the tribe of former spies. They are a very insular group of people.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, and that's how they get on then with the people around them. And yeah, absolutely, you've got that. I love the way you play the two sides there. When you're ringing up NASA, as we all do when we're, so the friendship is really important. And that sense of loneliness, we touched on that earlier, that sense of the fact that they've got to keep the secrets and the secrecy of spies. And they've really bonded in this book. And so we get very much a sense of their friendship together. And in The Summer Guest, that's contrasted with the family who are not so well bonded and quite fractured, really, aren't they? So how did you build them? How did they come to you? Again, did you have a voice in your head?
The Conover family, and I apologize to the real Conover family in Maine because they actually do exist.
You borrowed their name.
I borrowed the name. I like the name. That one, it took me a while to figure out what was going on. What I knew was that there was a young woman who just married into the family with a child from a previous marriage. So they are outsiders inside this very wealthy, larger, old family. And when her daughter goes missing, this is a source of, for me, this is a big conflict, is that she knows there's something wrong.
Yeah.
My daughter has gone missing. Why are none of you upset? And the big family is going, it's Maine, she's fine, she's probably in the woods. They completely discount her fears. And so as the hour gets later and later, and they're all eating dinner and drinking, and she is going nuts because her daughter has not come home for dinner. I could just feel that tension. And that was terrible. I mean, imagine being the woman who marries into a family like that. And of course, you're the one who comes from poorer circumstances, so you never feel you're going to be part of that family.
And the tension comes through so clearly, and because she's in a new place, so she doesn't know the area, she doesn't know the house, she doesn't really know the family.
Yeah.
She knows her husband, obviously, and that tension, you build that tension incredibly, and we're terrified because a lot of people are reading it will be parents, and the thought, I think that's one of the biggest things that can happen to a parent is something happening to your child. I mean, it absolutely is. And so when she disappears, then we have that. Where is she? And she doesn't know the area either, and her phone's not working because it's one of those patchy places where the phones don't work.
We have those in Maine,
Yeah, exactly. And so that's really where we come into the story, and then we discover that she's disappeared, and we start to track then that story. But there's also a fantastic. You're going to have to help me with the surname. The fantastic police officer, Jo. Is it Thibodeau?
Thibodeau.
Say again.
Thibodeau.
Thibodeau.
That's how we say it in Maine, anyway.
You know, when you're scanning, sometimes you read, and I read it my way, and it's probably not right. But she's a fantastic character. She's really feisty. She's young. She's great contrast to Maggie, and she doesn't actually realise for quite a long time through the stories quite who these people are. They're just sort of interfering older people, really, as far as she's concerned. So talk to us a little bit about her.
Oh, I love Jo Thibodeau. Jo Thibodeau represents to me the best of Maine. She is a solid Maine girl. And there's something about the state of Maine that raises really tough women. I mean, we had the first senator in the United States Senate from Maine. And, our governor is a woman. Two of our senators, two of our congresspeople are women. And so it raises tough women. And I think of Jo as being one of those really solid, kind of salt-of-the-earth people. And I also like the fact that she's not bitter about anything. Everything in her life has been fine. Yeah. She's got a good brother. She's got a good father. She's worked with good men. So she comes in with no chip on her shoulder. She just wants to do her job because she loves her town. Her family's been there for generations, and she wants to protect it. So when she first encounters the Martini Club, she just thinks, oh, sweet old grannies and grandpas, right? They need to be protected.
Yeah.
And in the spy when a dead body shows up on Maggie's driveway.
And it's not just a dead body. Like
It's a tortured dead body.
Yeah, there's quite a lot going on there. It's not like your average dead body, like a walker who happens to be wandering past and just, you know, fell down dead or anything like that.
Yes.
It's quite sort of ritualistic as well, in a way, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Jo sees his dead body and she sees Maggie and she feels sorry for Maggie. Granny's going to be so upset. And she doesn't understand it when Maggie is like cold as ice. And Maggie's taking this very coolly. And that's the first thing that comes to Jo's mind is, why is this woman not behaving this way?
Yeah, it's literally like she's flipped into mode, isn't it?
Yeah. So, and it's so much fun to see that contrast between somebody who's really not worldly, she's never traveled, and these 5 people who are incredibly sophisticated.
Yeah. That's very true, actually. You do get that completely on the page. But yet they have huge respect for her because they can see, Maggie and the girls can see that she's good at what she does and she's solid, as you say, and she's just, and she's great. She's a great foil. Did you, when you came up with the idea for the Martini Club, did you come up with her, you know, sometimes when you're thinking of a story, you're thinking of how can I tell this story and whose voice am I going to use? Or did she just arrive?
You know, she just arrived.
I knew you were going to say that.
It's really kind of scary because, you know, every time you start a book, I liken it to jumping off a cliff and just hoping you're going to land safely. I don't know where things are going. I'm a seat-of-the-pants writer. Jo appeared on the page, but you know, in a way, I was just modeling her after people I know, good solid people. Yeah. So she came in very easily, and I also knew that I didn't want her to come in with any bitterness. She's an ethical person.
She is. She's great.
And these five spies who maybe have done unethical things in their lives, they recognize that she's a good egg.
Person. Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, because I was going to ask you about your process. Did you not plot from the very beginning, or did you plot for a bit and then switch to this flowing? I've just written a book with no plotting, and it honestly took me about a year and a few months, and it felt like walking through treacle uphill the whole time.
Yeah.
It was hard work.
I think I don't plot ahead of time because every time I have tried to write an outline, I always end up throwing it away because something happens on the page.
Yeah, you need that little bit of, that's where your magic comes.
Something happens and you go, oh, the plot just went that way. You know, throw that away and let's go in this direction. It's the same way with characters. They'll say something and suddenly it opens up a whole new dimension, not just in the character, but where the story's going.
It's actually incredible. When you talk about that process, it really is a magical process. It's your subconscious mind.
Yeah.
Do you find you chewing on the story the whole time when you're not actually physically writing?
Yeah, I know. My husband gets really annoyed with me because he knows that I'm talking to somebody who isn't there. What this process leads to, though, is a lot of writer's block. Because eventually you're going to write yourself into a corner and you can't get out of it.
Yeah.
And what I've found, I mean, I have different ways of getting around that. I just take long drives. I found that a long, boring drive is a good way to get past writer's block because when your mind is focused on, you know, you have a task to do, but it's kind of boring and you don't really need to be to 100% focused on it. There's a part of your brain that's still working.
Yeah.
And once you look away from that, it starts to solve the issues on your own. You know, the example I always use was I wrote this book called Vanish. It was a Brazilian Isles book. And when I was starting it, it was about a man who wakes up in the morgue. They think he's dead. They think he's dead. Yeah. And then Maura Isles hears a noise and she unzips it and his eyes pop open. So she sends him off to the emergency room. And there he does something completely unexpected. He grabs a security guard's gun, he kills him, and he takes hostages in the hospital. And among the hostages he takes is Jane Rizzoli, who is there giving birth to her baby. So she's going to give birth under terrible circumstances. So here I have...
Very nice, your characters.
I have this great beginning, and I have this exciting middle, and then I got bored. I stopped writing. I thought, I don't know where this is going. I'm not interested anymore.
So much has happened here.
Yeah, I know. It's like, this is really exciting. Why do I have writer's block? And I went for a long drive in Texas. I think it was like 4 hours in the car. And it occurred to me what my problem was. Who takes hostages in this world? It's always men. But if it's a woman, oh, that changes things. That's different.
Yeah.
Why would a woman do something like that if she's sane?
Yeah.
And I thought, because she's terrified. And that completely changed that. I mean, that
Whole story.
that story went 180 degrees. So that was it. That was the end of the writer's block. I went home, and I just kept on writing from that point on as if it had always been a woman. And the rest of the book wrote itself.
Flew through.
Yeah, but it took that drive.
Yeah, it's an amazing process. It's amazing. I find, when you get to that writer's block thing and something's sticking, and you go back to where it was working, and then find the wrong turn that you took.
Yeah, what was the turn?
Yeah.
Well, in this case, the turn was at the very beginning.
Indeed, because you had a man.
I shouldn't have put a man in there.
Yeah. That's
it was a woman's job to
Yeah.
wake up dead.
That's it. Well, but also it's really interesting because you needed to write that and get to that point.
Yeah.
In order to find out that it was a woman.
Yes.
You know, you needed to go through that process and have the whole thing set up and the whole saga and the story and everything to realise that actually, to then go on the drive. I'm chuckling away quite to myself here because I do a lot of driving, thinking when I'm driving. And I thought it was only me. It's not really very safe, I don't know.
No,
Anyway,
well, maybe not in England, but...
Texas is fine. Long, big roads. I know, I'm always going the wrong direction and my kids are in the back going, Mother, we're not supposed to be going to...
He's driving. I just figured it out!
Exactly. Suddenly find you're driving them to school and you're not supposed to be there going that way at all. But it is a great way because I think it's that Agatha Christie used to do a lot of plotting when she was washing up. And I think it's that thing of doing, and I think I know a lot of people who walk and plot, and I think it's that thing of doing something where your mind isn't busy.
Something automatic.
Yeah. And obviously because we're very good drivers, we can drive automatically. Any problems at all there? I think it really comes through that level of the way it flows and the way it's flowing in your head as you're writing. Do you have to do a lot of editing then?
Oh, yes. Yes, I will go through five drafts before I feel like it's ready to show anybody. Yeah. And nobody else sees it until then.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Yeah, but good work because I think you only find a story through writing.
Well, the first I've heard an author refer to it as the vomit draft.
Yes, a friend of mine talks about that too.
Yes, the very first draft, and all you're doing for me, it's not just getting the basic plot points going. It's getting the emotional high points, the waypoints of your characters. At this point, she's happy, she's in love. At this point, she's trying to decide, do I marry him? At this point, she's pulled in two directions because the CIA is telling her you've got to use your husband. And then there's another point where all of a sudden her world falls apart. Yeah. So you're just tracking the emotions of your characters more than anything. I think that's really what we read for. It's not we can read a mystery novel and completely forget the complexities of the mystery, but we will remember what we felt about that character.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why they resonate with you so well. But certainly will they resonate with me so well. It's because you feel like you know them. And as you mentioned, that decision that she has to choose between her CIA and her husband, it's one of those, oh my, like, what do you do moments. It really is an absolute, I mean, you that's happened in the story, but it's you being evil to your characters. It's a horrible choice.
It's a horrible. Well, it's also that the request made of her is not that out of bounds because, you take a step in one direction. The problem is you can't step back.
No, that's it.
And you have to keep moving further and further and deeper into trouble.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what happens to Maggie.
It does in that instance, and she ends up in quite a heap of trouble. But then I thought it was great. I don't want to. It's very hard to talk about crime, isn't it? It's spoilers.
But
I don't want to give you any spoilers.
Most of them have read the Spy Coast.
You just have to read the book. This is basically the thing. You just have to read both of them. The Spy Coast and those who haven't read The Summer Guest, because you will be immersed in the story. But I'm really interested in that because when you talk about the fact that you aren't plotting it and you're just writing it and things are just happening, the twists are still going. I interviewed Jeffrey Deaver there a while ago, and he was talking about how he likes to have 3 twists. And the 3 twists, the first one is the one that like regular readers will get. And, if you're a big crime reader, you'll be able to get that one, no problem. The second twist is for the people who maybe aren't, it's a harder twist. They're less likely to get it. And the last twist is that power twist that nobody's going to get, and they're going to finish the book and go, wow.
Yeah.
But your twists are completely in there, but you're not plotting those twists. So how does that happen?
He's a lawyer.
Well, you're a doctor.
And I find it's interesting that when I talk to writers who are really into plotting ahead of time, they often tend to be male lawyers.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether it's a function of what it's like to work in the courtroom. You have to have your ducks lined up in a row.
Have it all planned. So funny you should say that. I was talking to somebody the other day about board work, actually, and we were talking about lawyers, and she was, oh yes, you've got lots of lawyers there, and she's a doctor, and she said, she focuses on diagnosis, and so when she approaches a problem, it's from a diagnostic point of view. And do you think you do that through your writing?
No.
It's a diagnostic thing?
No, not at all.
Not at all?
Not at all. I mean, it's very often I will get to 2/3 through the book, and then I'll think, now I know who did it.
Yeah.
Because you're just starting off with this rush,
Yeah.
this rush of energy about, and I like to start with some kind of a situation.
Yeah.
A puzzling situation. You don't know how you got to that point,
Yeah.
but you will eventually find out by the end. And that's where I start a lot of my books, is this, like, for instance, Vanish, again, dead corpse wakes up in morgue and then takes hostages. How did we get here? I don't know.
Yeah, let's write and find out.
Right,
So.
but I think it's important to just get that momentum going from the very beginning.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's wonderful because you can trust the process now. At this stage of the game,
Yeah, but every time I do it, I always wonder if this is the time it's not going to work.
not going to work.
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
Writing is terrifying.
It is.
It can be really scary. I saw, and as you're writing the first and the second draft sometimes, the book just looks awful.
Yeah.
It just is in such bad shape. I saw one author describe it as waking up every morning and there's a deformed baby at the end of your bed.
Awful. Yeah.
And you wake up and that deformed baby is there every morning, telling you you've done something really bad.
Really
you still
bad.
have to fix it. And then by the end of it, all of a sudden the baby's normal.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
You've worked it all out.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. So, but I think it's that rewriting process. And I think not being afraid to rewrite and being brave enough to know that you could, I mean, that change you were talking about between the courts being male and moving to female, after you've written, you've probably written, 20,000, 30,000
yeah,
words
yeah.
at that point? It's a lot of words to be writing to make a big decision like that.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big, brave decision, because you could have, if you didn't have so much experience that you knew that was the right thing and it had all fallen into place, you could have tried to persevere with a,
Well, I always knew that I would be able to fix it.
Yeah.
I mean, and once we've come up with a solution, which is, it's a woman and she's terrified and she's doing this for a specific reason, then the first half, okay, I'll have to rewrite 20,000 words, but
it's not.
But I know,
Yeah.
I know what I'm going to be doing with it.
Yeah. And did you have any problems with these ones? Did you have anything?
There's a problem with every book. They're all
Different problems.
They're different sorts of problems. Actually, with the Spy Coast, I did not have much of a problem, except that I did not really know where that marriage was going.
Yeah.
The trope in spy fiction is that the person you love turns out to be the bad guy.
Okay.
Right? That's a trope.
Yeah.
Your husband turns out to be a Russian spy.
Yeah.
Right? And I got to that point where I thought, I don't know, is Danny good or bad?
Ooh.
And then I realized, I'm just going to give you spoilers here because that book has been out for almost 2 years now.
And some of them have read it, but don't worry,
Yes.
you'll still get loads out of it, even if you do know what happens.
So I get to the point where we find out what Danny's fate is, and I thought, I'm not going to go with the trope. I'm going to give Maggie one true thing in her life.
Yeah.
There was one thing that was genuine and real, and it makes the tragedy much worse.
It does. I cried. It was devastating. It really was. You'll find out when you read it, for those of you who haven't read it. But you don't know, as a reader. I was there. I couldn't tell whether he was good or bad.
Right.
What was going on?
He seems like too good to be true.
Yes, and it was amazing. And he's so talented. And I really love there's a really interesting detail about medicine that's in his doctor's bag. I presume that did come from your experience as a doctor. That's really good. And again, that's that where you learn something new on the page. And I love that. The detail of that was really, really well executed and really interesting. It gives a very nice twist to something. It sounds like we're talking just in cryptic circles now, doesn't it? Because we can't tell you too much. You just have to buy it and read it, and it'll all be fine. You'll see exactly what we're talking about. So where does each guy? Where can you remember the sort of the actual moment where you go, yeah, that's the story. That's the start of the story. Do you get like you've got Maggie talking in your ear the first time, and does that then need to connect with something else, or do you just start writing from there?
I just started writing from there. I mean, I'd heard she was going to tell me who she was when she used to be.
Yes.
Yeah, and I know where she is now. She's a chicken farmer. And I love the idea that somebody who just seems so, not very interesting, somebody who's just there feeding their chickens every day, has a really rich background that if you just dug a little bit, you could find out more.
Yeah.
I'm surrounded by people like that. People who have really past lives that we don't know anything about. And then when you just ask them, you find out that, yeah, I mean, he was a spy or he was an assassin. We actually had an assassin in our town who made it onto the cover of Look magazine because of his exploits.
Oh, goodness me. That was a surprise to the locals.
Yes. But that's where I started. I wanted to dig below the layers of this woman who works every day getting up at dawn to feed her chickens.
Yeah. Told you there was lots of chickens in it. And you really do that. And I think that's I think one of the secrets of these books and why they become so immersive and why you feel so much that you are, as a reader, you're there with them the whole time. You're seeing the chickens, you're seeing the personalities, and it's very much, I suppose that there's that sense of when you meet Maggie, you know she's not really a chicken farmer, but because you've managed to layer her. I will get to the point of this question in a minute. When I was speaking to Anne Cleves a little while ago, she was talking about leaving room for the reader.
Yeah.
And you do that. So we get these hints of who the character is and the fact that they're multi-layered and there's all this stuff. There must be something going on in the past, but you're not very sure what it is. And yet, you leave room then for the reader to form sort of their own picture and to move forward through the story.
Yeah, I think there's a big mistake that a lot of beginning authors make. And that is they give us too much biographical information to begin with.
Yes.
We call a biographical dump. Or my agent calls too much throat clearing.
Yes. Yeah.
Too much literary throat clearing. I think we read to find out who these people are. And if you tell us everything, like what they ate for breakfast every day, that takes away the mystery. So I on purpose do not do biographical sketches. I mean, I know some of us have been told we need to write a sketch before we start writing the book. But you discover things along the way.
Yeah.
And you discover her friends, for instance, and how they got together. And I think the reason people come back, or came back to the summer guests, is the sense of community.
Yeah.
It's these 5 people who really, in some ways, they're like soldiers who've been in the trenches. They're
bonded, aren't they?
They're bonded by crisis. And probably the strongest relationship 2 people will ever have are soldiers who face death together. Maybe even stronger than the man with his wife. And that's the way I see these people, is that they have faced some terrible things together. And wouldn't that be wonderful to retire with the people you trust?
Yes, yeah. I mean, because they really have each other's backs, don't they? And they have this sort of there's an unspoken sort of dialogue that goes on between them because they're in that world, they've been in that world, they've got that experience, and there's a sort of connection. They don't need to say to each other what needs to be done.
Yeah.
There's some great scenes with Maggie where she keeps getting caught in cupboards. I'm just thinking about the things that need to be done because it's in the Spy Coast, isn't it? Where she goes into somebody's house and she has to hide in the wardrobe, and then the guy comes in.
Yes.
And is it Declan who's outside? And
yes.
He's trying to tell her to get out, and she can't talk to him. And it's that trust of the fact that they've got this operation running, and
it goes bad.
And it goes really bad. And that actually happens to her twice, doesn't it? I'm trying to think now what the other is where she gets caught up in something. But it's so clever because they know each other so well. They know what they're going to do. They know they're going to react in a particular way.
Yeah. And they know they're going to do what it takes to get their buddy out.
Exactly. Because the 2 lads were getting ready to go in, weren't they? Even whatever the situation was going to be, and rescue her. But she managed to.
And to do this at age 70.
Well, this is it. It's not like they're all 20,
Yes.
She's hiding in a wardrobe, and there's all sorts of nasty people outside, and the tension.
And you know what? It is funny though because there is some romance in it. I'm just thinking, yeah, I can imagine, you know, really sexy 75-year-old men. It's possible.
It's lovely, actually, that, because, yeah, there's a connection between the characters who want to go and rescue. Yeah. So, and that's it. And he's prepared to do anything, isn't he? Really, and that's when we really start to see the fact that, yes, that there's this, they've known each other for years, and there's this spark, and it's growing, and now, and we get to a point where he suddenly confesses to her that, well, he doesn't entirely confess, but she gets the picture that perhaps there might be something going on.
Yeah.
And it's really because of the thing that's happened. Again, we're going all cryptic on you again here, sorry. Because of the thing that's happened in the Spy Coast, she's not been ready to have a relationship up to that point. And so it's also recognisable, this. Does it sound so familiar to, you know, we all know people who've been in this type of situation. And so, yes, so then we get... that relationship starts to begin, and we get that little bit of romance. Do you enjoy, because you came from romance?
I did come from romance. This is a very subtle romance, but you know, I think for women in particular, we always have this, I suppose, this romantic notion that there's nothing better than a man who's loved you from afar for many years and just didn't have the nerve to say anything. And that's where we are with Maggie and Declan.
Yeah. And a nice guy.
A nice guy. A nice guy who occasionally does bad things, but
well, only occasionally. Yeah.
But that's the job.
Exactly, it is. But it's no, they're really just a great bunch. And really, when I was reading it, honestly, when I finished the Summer Guests, I really did feel bereft. And then I was like, oh, I can read the other one. I hadn't realised they were anyway.
And so I'm working on the third book, so they will be back.
And that's Ingrid, isn't it, in the third book?
It's going to be about Ingrid, yes.
Yeah, because she actually, we learned a lot about Maggie, and we've got a good bit about Declan and the rest, but we don't actually see a whole lot of Ingrid through them, do we? So there's lots you can play with there.
Well, what I think of Ingrid as being the Hermione of the group. She's the clever one.
Yeah.
And she's married. She's married to the analyst. But Ingrid, of course, had a previous life and a previous lover. And so, you know, again, I focus on emotions, right? I don't even know what the plot is about, but I just know it's about their marriage and what happens when her ex-lover comes back into her life and says, we need to go back to work. Ooh. And she, you know, what does she do? So, as I said, the book, The Spy Coast, was about regret. The book, The Shadow Friends, is about longing. What does a woman who sees the end of her life coming and thinks about what could have happened if I'd chosen this man instead, who still is crazy about her?
Goodness.
Yeah.
Goodness.
So what happens with this marriage?
Exactly. Goodness. And how far are you through that?
I'm on the second draft.
Oh, excellent. So you know what happens.
I do know what happens.
You do know what happens. Try and prize that out of you later. That's fantastic. And I can't wait for the next book either. And the best news as well is that, well, I hope it's the best news, is that the Spy Coast being optioned by Amazon, hasn't it?
Yeah, but for Amazon Studios for television series.
Yeah. Great series.
I have read the pilot episode script. It's very, very good.
Cool.
And their intention was that it would be not just a limited series, but it would be a continuing series. Yeah.
Great, that's great. And because that's the thing about them, because they've got lots of story. There's so much story that you can get to and move forwards with. It should be great. And do you know who's going to play the characters? Have they?
No, I know they've had a casting meeting. I don't know yet. I've heard a number of names, some of which make sense, and some of which I'm going, huh? But that's how it goes.
Yeah, just wait and see what happens.
Yeah.
Well, who was it? Was it Agatha Christie? No, P.D. James obviously wrote the Dalglish series, but she actually wrote 3 books about, I think it was a character called Christina Grey, and when they made a TV series of that, she hated the character so much she never wanted to write another one. So I really hope that they get the right people for this. It's very important.
Well, I am really pushing them to dig into British actors, because I have a big crush on Jason Isaacs.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear it.
I think he'd be a perfect Declan.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Oh, exciting, very exciting to see who they cast now. Now, it is time to turn it over to the audience to ask them questions, and also our audience online. I should have said hello to you right at the very beginning, so I got completely, I was so dying to get started to ask Tess questions. So does anybody have any questions in the room? Have to be, all of a sudden there's a lot of hands.
Yeah,
so
hands are going up, good.
Nicola in the front row there.
Do I need a mic, or do I just...
You might, there's one coming down here to you.
You have a good voice, though, so.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It helps when you sit near the front. Well, first of all, I thought this was absolutely great, and I'm sorry I was the person creeping in when you'd already started. I've got 2 observations and a question. Observation: I am a lawyer that plots. So it's not just men that do it, but probably for the same reasons that you say you'd like to have a certain order.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm very much a believer that a plot is like I don't know, like a skeleton or the scaffolding around a building, if you like.
Yes.
But you can pivot away from that. You don't have to stick very rigidly with it. But it sort of helps me with my thinking, personally. The other thing is what you said about the military in NASA and the civilians in NASA. I used to work for defense a while ago, and that they have that same kind of schism.
Yes.
You know, they don't really, and I worked in a semi-detached way, so they'd each tell me things about the other.
Ooh.
That I can't talk about because of stuff that I've signed.
That's a shame, because there could have been a great book in
One of
that.
them.
Actually, the question that I have is a really simple one. What is it with Maine and CIA spies?
Why did they get there? Lot of questions. I mean, I have tried to find the answer. In fact, that journalist who showed up tried to find the answer. Number one is, well, it's a beautiful place. Number two is it's far from any nuclear targets. I've heard that. Number three, the original spies that came up were probably, they were from Ivy League schools like Harvard and Yale, and from wealthy families. So they would come up on vacation to Maine just because it's a beautiful place, and a lot of them were sailors, so they had sailboats, and that's, you know, and lakes and things. So they may have been introduced as children. Finally, we had MK Ultra that was up there, and Maine was also a location of safe houses. So if you wanted to hide somebody, you'd send them up there to the woods. And they just stayed. But here's the interesting thing, and I love this about Maine, is that it means we have a very, very well-informed population. My little town has a conference once a year. It's been going for 50 years. We get ambassadors and generals and Nobel Prize-winning journalists coming to Maine for a weekend in February during snowstorms. They've been coming for 50 years to give us talks about global affairs, and it was started by CIA.
Wow.
So, you know, that's one of the benefits of living in this place, is that you're surrounded by people who really know their world affairs. And I was just at this conference a couple weekends ago where the topic was democracy under threat. And it was an auditorium. It was 500 people they were all silver-haired. And when they would get up to ask questions, you knew that they knew about that country because they had served in that country. And so it's, to be around people like this is really interesting.
Wow.
Thank you.
Okay, great, good question, great answer. Now, well, we go just to the lady behind. I'm going to work through so we get to everybody. Sorry, next to each other. Try one and then the other.
Thank you so much. It's an obvious question, but I was wondering what the response was from your neighbours who were the agents to the book. I mean, have they been coming and sneaking and knocking on your door going, just a sort of possible plot you might want to consider, and giving you any information, or are they just across the side of the street now?
Oh, no, you know, they all know who I am. And because I attend some of the same events that they do, they will often say something about, oh, you know, read your book, liked your book, and it was reviewed actually by 2 CIA agents, and something called the Cipher Brief, which is a CIA online magazine.
That's great.
But I had the strangest comment just a couple of weeks ago. A bookseller said one of the customers couldn't make it because she had something else to do, but she said when she read The Spy Coast, the hair on the back of her neck stood up. Oh, she said, wow. I know who you were writing about. And I thought, I made her up?
Oh, wow.
So I mean, I think that just getting a nugget of authentic, you know, some kind, and maybe the detail, or maybe it was just that person had served in Bangkok the way Maggie did, made her convinced that it was based on a real person.
Yeah. It is so authentic. I think that's the thing. Authentic is the word for the spies and the locations and everything. It's incredible.
Well, mine was kind of similar. I mean, I was interested. You're a wonderful speaker. I mean, really, it's a joy to hear you talk.
Thank you.
Sandra. I've heard you talk before. But wonderful. But yeah, it was kind of with the CIA because you're, I guess, writing about a lot of hidden things with a lot of the readers. who are hidden, who may be reading it, and then you're hidden from them.
Yes. Well, I'm not hidden from them. They know. I know.
Where to find you.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
But my main question, because I think you answered that partially, is the first book that was kind of under the genre, I guess, is that you wrote some time ago. What would you say the main differences are now? I mean, between the first book you wrote, how has your work developed?
Oh, okay, like the very first book I wrote.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I started writing romantic suspense, which is love and murder, I guess you could say that. And what I've learned, you know, over my career, I have written romantic suspense, medical thrillers, crime novels, 2 historicals, a science fiction, a ghost story, and now spy novels. And I can tell you that every single genre is difficult. It's that we all authors face the same situation as who are these people and what is this book about? And every genre has its own kind of paper bag you got to punch yourself out of. I mean, romance, you've got to have somebody fall in love, and that's not always easy to portray. So what I've learned is that it's all difficult. I've learned that writing faster doesn't mean it's a worse book. That somebody who takes 10 years to write a book, that's not necessarily going to be a better book. And I've learned to trust just my gut. You know, I think writing is not so much an intellectual process, but it's an emotional process. It's trying to feel what these people are feeling. And as I said before, we all read mysteries and we can't remember all the details of who killed whom and how did they get away with it, but we remember the detective. You know, when I think about something like Foyle's War, for instance, I don't remember all those little details about the mysteries that he had to solve, but I just remember him.
Yeah, it's about people at the end of the day, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah. Fascinating. Now, sorry, there was one behind you. I saw a hand earlier. Do you want to stick your hands back up again and we can see where they're...
I've read quite a lot of your books, the series and the standalones. Do you prefer writing and revisiting characters, or do you prefer just to put them in the box once they're done?
Oh, you know, it really depends on what is moving me at that particular point. Like I was writing Rizzoli and Isles, and suddenly I got this idea for a historical set in 1940s Venice. And nobody wanted that book. my editor in the US said, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? But I have learned that the way to maintain your career over a long period of time is to write the book you want to write. Otherwise you'll be Conan Doyle and want to kill off Sherlock Holmes, right? You're just sick of this person. So it's important. I call them palate cleanser books. At least they're cleansing my palate. And you get that book out of your system, and then you're ready to do maybe what the market is demanding. So it really depends. Sometimes, like this series, I want to do the next series book because I love these characters. Rizzoli and Isles, I'm not sure. They're still alive, I can go back to them, but I'm not sure. And then when the standalones come, that's usually a book out of pure passion.
Good question. Now, I think we've got some...
Hi, we've got a question from online, Erin, who joins us from Florida.
Oh, hi, Erin. We've discovered we've got a mutual friend.
Erin says, you talked about the importance of detail, which is so beautifully done in the Martini Club books and all of your books. Do you spend a lot of time checking these details, or do you draw from your own amazing life experiences?
Most of the time, I don't think about the details. I just pull them out of memory. So something like Bangkok, for instance. I mean, yeah, I will do research about the street names, you know, make sure that geographically it's memorable, that it's correct. But for something like that bowl of noodle soup in the little marketplace, that's all muscle. I mean, it's emotional memory, it's gustatory memory, and sensory memory. And I think that when readers read a passage like that, they don't really care about whether the street is correct or not. They care about what that beef soup tasted like. So I think that's where detail comes in.
Yes. Yeah. Excellent question. Now, any more in the room? Oh, lady here.
Were you happy with the casting of Rizzoli and Isles?
Okay. The question was I happy with the casting of Rizzoli and Isles? They were not my characters. Yeah, because if you read Rizzoli and Alice, you knew that part of Rizzoli's persona was that she was not a good-looking woman. We all identified with her because she was the woman who was always ignored. And it gives her a chip on her shoulder, which is like part of why she's kind of a feisty woman. And she was always beset upon by her brothers because she was the girl in the family. But then they cast beautiful Angie Harmon, and there's nobody who will ever overlook Angie Harmon when she walks in the door. So yeah, they made that difference, and I thought, well, okay, I can live with that. And then Maura Isles, who I imagine as being kind of a dark and gloomy goth-like person, they cast a beautiful blonde. And what worked though in Hollywood is that they added a lot of humor to the series, and I think that's why it had such a long life. I mean, it went for 7 seasons, over 100 episodes. But that's something you have to accept sometimes.
Yeah, things changing. Now, any more questions? Oh, sorry, down here.
A lot of authors say they won't read when they're writing, or they won't read within their genre. So what do you do when you're not writing?
Another good question.
I never stop reading. And, but right now, I confess I'm reading a lot of nonfiction. Not just because of the book. I mean, I'm reading a lot about Russia these days because the 3rd book does involve some Russian politics. But I'm also reading because of the current situation in the United States. I'm trying to understand it. I am completely flabbergasted, and I want to understand it. So that's what I seem to be doing right now. For instance, I was fascinated by Christopher Steele's book about his investigations and the Trump file that he wrote. And that kind of intersects with spy stuff anyway, because he was a spy. And I'm reading a lot about history.
Good question. Just one here.
Hi. I wanted to ask, when you write, kind of, if we take Rizzoli and Isles and your kind of earlier books, they're so beautifully gruesome. They're scary. You just couldn't sleep at night. Did it affect you as kind of as a writer
How gruesome they were.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the detailing is chilling and it sort of stays with you. And did you feel very different writing kind of like CIA detective series again?
Yeah.
Emotionally, how do you process that as a writer?
Well, I think because I'm a doctor, the gruesomeness didn't bother me so much. There were a lot of people who read the Rizzoli and Isles books and said, "Oh my God, they're so gruesome, they're so violent, they're so this, they're so that." But I was able to put a barrier between me and that because it's through the eyes of Maura Isles usually. She's a professional, and I remember what it was like to stand in the operating room and have a patient, really bleeding to death. And it's coming up everywhere, and it's splattering you in the face, and you just cannot find where that artery is. And yeah, it's a horrible situation, but the doctors are there to do a job, and so they don't really feel horror. They just feel like, I got to get this done. And that's how I was looking at these pathology scenes, these autopsy scenes, or these crime scenes. Is you walk in as a professional, you're doing your job, and that's a little bit of a barrier between you and really the horrible graphic nature of these deaths.
So that was a very well put question. And one right at the back there. I hope people online will be able to hear that because you put it beautifully.
Yeah, hi Tess. You sound very enthusiastic, like you really enjoy your writing. So I wanted to ask, what are the things that set your senses off, that gets you to say, okay, I want to write the next book, and you're really excited about it?
What was...
So what sets you off? What are the things that sets your senses off that makes you want to write the next book?
Makes me want to go back and write. It's characters. If it's a series, for instance, for the next book, I just want to find out about this marriage. Does it survive the ex-lover coming back into her life? So now it's a little bit like watching a soap opera in your head. You want to know what happens to the people. You want to know whether they split up or so and so turns out to be a villain. So it's just trying to find the story that is interesting to me, and these characters, and what happens to them, and do they survive? So that's what sets me off. It's very seldom a puzzle. I mean, it's funny because we think of mystery as, oh,
Yeah, just
we want
writer.
to solve the puzzle. That's not usually what sets me off.
Yeah, and the puzzle comes after the emotion, the character's emotion.
Right, the puzzle follows the emotions. Yeah. And sometimes we have to make the puzzle fit, and we have to, make the plot be very complicated so that it actually works.
Yeah. I like a complicated plot. Real good. One down here. Do you want to just hang on so people online can hear you too? That's great.
Hi, thanks for the conversation. I'm really enjoying it. I noticed more recently you've done some co-writing with some other co-authors, and I wondered how you choose your co-authors and how your process of co-authoring is different to when you write on your own.
Oh, okay. So there are two reasons I'm doing a co-author. One is that I'm doing a television script right now with a co-screenwriter, and that's a completely different thing. And I did one book with Gary Braver. It was called Choose Me, and that happened during COVID. It was just before everything shut down, and we were at a cocktail party, and I was following the news of the Me Too movement and thought, I like to turn things upside down. I said, what if we wrote a book about the Me Too movement, except that it's a man who's accused of doing something inappropriate, which he has done, but we tell it from his point of view as the hero. That's like kind of risky, isn't it?
Messing with the whole thing.
It's messing with everything, but I was intrigued by that idea. So I was telling this to my friend who is a university professor and also an attorney, and also a writer. And I said, wouldn't it be fun for us to do this? I write the female point of view, you write the male point of view. We turn it into a mystery where this professor has an affair with his student, and then she ends up dead, and he's the prime suspect. And then it becomes like, did he do it, did he not do it? So he said, sure, let's do that. So then the world shut down, and that
was perfect.
And he would send me a chapter, and then I would send him a chapter, and then that was how that collaboration came about. But it was more turning the Me Too movement around and looking at it from the point of view of he's a naughty man, he was a bad man, but what are the consequences in his life? Yeah. I'm sure it offended people.
Well, no, it's fascinating to hear how you really do mess with these characters and these ideas, and you like to turn things around and see what's happening.
Yeah, it was kind of fun to push the buttons.
Yeah, push it. No.
Hi, Tess. I just wonder how do you choose your characters' names?
Oh, how do I choose? That is you probably have the same trouble.
Yeah,
it's difficult sometimes. It's very difficult. Maggie was easy because I don't know, I've always loved the name Maggie. And the fact that she raises chickens, I thought Maggie Bird makes sense. Sometimes I auction off the right to name characters, and then that's how I'll get a character name because the money goes to charity. Mora Isles was a charity giveaway.
Oh,
so there's a real Dr. Mora Isles.
Oh, wow.
And whoever got that name got 13 books out of it. So that was a very good donation. I used to look at obituaries for names. Because I figure if their parents went to all the trouble to name this kid, it must be a decent name. I have a baby book. Do you have a baby book? Yeah, Name Your Baby book. Yeah. I'll just flip through that. It's hard sometimes. And we also have to remember not to use too much alliteration, so you don't want to have
all the same name.
Four people that begin with P, because it's very confusing. Yeah. And it has to somehow it has to be culturally correct and generationally correct, so that it wouldn't. There must be some like out of time name that would be very strange. So yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, baby names from the year that the person was born.
Yes. Yeah,
to try and get that bit right. Yeah. There we go. Now, anyway, one just behind. Are you going that way? There we go. There's one here. Is there one over here too? No. Coming down from the back.
I'm so glad there are questions.
They're good questions.
So you have so many different characters that are completely different from one another, and I was wondering, do you have a favorite one that really stuck with you?
For all my books?
Yeah.
I would say Maggie is my favorite. Maggie's my favorite. I like Jane Rizzoli, but I could never live with her. Yeah. Maura Isles is the closest to me, to my personality, but I find her very boring. So, but Maggie, I mean, I get her.
You'd have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Oh, one right at the back.
How did you get into writing? Because did you do it when you were young, as a child? Did you, the classic, keep a diary? How did you get into writing?
Yeah, I think that a lot, I don't know about you, but, well, actually, I'm not sure what the English equivalent of Nancy Drew novels.
Oh, yes.
You have, yeah. So I grew up.
Enid Blyton.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I used to read Nancy Drew, the girl detective. She's 18. She's like a role model for strong women, but she was back in the 1950s. And when I turned 7, I said to my father, I want to write. I want to be a writer like the ghostwriter's name, whoever that was. And he said that was no way to make a living. So, I come from immigrant stock, and the security is so important to them. And he said, go into science, because you'll find a job in that. So that's how I ended up in medical school. But I always knew that I would write probably as a hobby. And even when I was on call as a doctor, that call room, you're working 80 hours a week. If I had a couple of hours off and I'd go to the call room, I'd try and write a page. And I was lucky that my kids slept a lot. When I went on maternity leave, it was my first chance to stay at home for a while. Those kids took long naps, and I would write a page.
That's great.
Yeah.
The lady who likes to be busy.
But I think the thing about writing is that a lot of us identify very early.
Yeah.
7 years old seems to be a pretty common age for especially girls.
Yeah, yeah. And Nancy Drew, definitely. A lot of crime writers have come out there. For us, it was Enid Blyton and the Famous Five, and then Nancy Drew. That's why. And then to Agatha Christie. So, how are we doing? Any more questions? Oh, another one down here. Can you hang on, because your question was beautifully put before, so I just want to make sure everybody online can hear it too. So, can we get the microphone down?
Tess, you've written a lot of books, and every single one stands kind of on its own. But I'm curious to know, of all of the books so far, do you have a favorite? Or maybe the one with which you have the closest affinity with? And if so, why?
It's like asking which is your favorite child.
I know, that is so hard. My favorite books, and I think a lot of authors will say this, my favorite books are the ones that my audience did not like. Maybe because they feel like orphan children, but they were the ones that were like the one-offs that came to me out of sheer passion. I wrote this book called The Bone Garden, and it's a historical novel set in 1830s Boston, and it's set during a time of childbed fever. Because it brought in medical history, and because I'm a doctor, I was fascinated by one character in particular, Dr. Oliver Wendell Holmes. That book stuck with me because it just opened my eyes to how lucky we are to live in an era now when you weren't going to the hospital and dying because of it. So I loved that book. And then I loved a book this is the weirdest book I ever wrote. It came to me in a dream, and it doesn't happen very often. So I was in Venice for my birthday years ago, and I had this nightmare. I dreamt I was playing my violin.
That was the Venice book you were talking about.
Yes.
Very good. No,
and there's a baby sitting next to me in my dream, and I was playing some really weird, strange music, and the baby turned into a monster. So I woke up and I thought, whoa, I don't know what that nightmare is about, but there's a book in it. And so I walked around Venice that day and ended up in the old Jewish quarter, and there's lots of memorials to the 246 Jews who died in the Holocaust from Venice. And there were a group of names. They were all just names and ages, and there was one group that was clearly a family. And it was like, this is what my book is about. It's about this family. So that became a book called Playing with Fire. It's about a woman from Boston who goes to Rome and buys this piece of handwritten music from an antique store. And she goes home, and every time she plays it, her little 3-year-old girl does something horrible, becomes the monster of my dream, stabs the cat, stabs her mom, does things like that. So the mother thinks, I'm going nuts, or there's something wrong with this music. So she goes back to Italy to find out where this music came from. But in alternating chapters, we go back to 1940s Venice, and we see the family that this book is about, and how the music comes to be composed, and who this violinist is. And this is the weird thing about this story that really makes it strange. Is I'm writing the book, and I'm describing a piece of music that doesn't exist. It's called Incendio. And halfway through the writing of this book, I had another dream. And I woke up, and the music was in my head. So I wrote it down, I composed the whole thing, and sent it off to a friend of mine who's a producer, and he goes, I know just the person to record it. So it was recorded by this incredibly gifted violinist from Toronto. She's a concert violinist. And I remember she called me up and she said, I'm practicing Incendio, my windows are open, I'm in Paris, and there's a whole bunch of people standing below listening.
Goodness.
So she recorded the music. So the whole book, the book came from a dream, the music came from a dream, and so many things were weird about it. Like the story says, my Italian violinist played an instrument that was 270 years old, made in Cremona, Italy. And after my violinist recorded it, she read the book and she goes, I can't believe this. She goes, I recorded the music on a violin that's 270 years old, made in Cremona.
Oh.
So it's these things that just like, and that's why it's one of my favorite books, even though I'm sure that the subject matter was too upsetting for a lot of people. But you know, you see those, you have those things happen to you and you go, what? Who's talking to me?
It's the magic.
Yeah.
The magic of writing. I think that is the most amazing place to end. Thank you so much. Brilliant questions. If any of you have any leftover questions that we didn't get to, Tess is going to be outside signing, so you could ask her very quickly while she's signing your book. Thank you so much, Tess
Thank
Gerritsen.
you for great questions.
Oh,
Wonderful conversation.
I've been looking forward to this so much.